Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Jackson. Welcome to Politics for the People. All right, this is a show that I've just started because I believe there's this huge need for us to talk about these issues. My name is Daniel Jackson, as I said, and I'm going to be running for Congress next year as a candidate in the 2024 election here in Georgia's 12th Congressional District. All right, so Georgia's 12th Congressional District is an area here in the Southeast Georgia region that is composed of 24 counties. All right, those 24 counties are listed right here in front of you. I just wanted to give you a quick depiction of that just so everybody understands the area that we're talking about. Now, the Politics for the People podcast has been created just so we can talk about issues specifically to this area, but at the same time, these issues are evident across the nation, right? So what I'm trying to do here as a candidate is I'm trying to figure out exactly how do we address these issues at the lower levels, which are the local levels, right? Because these 24 counties, you have to understand, they are individual organisms within themselves. What I mean by that, each county has their own board of education. Each county has their own board of commissioners. Each county has their own individual towns with their own individual cities and city councils. So those are the things that make it a little bit more complex when you start to deal with federal legislation having an impact at the local levels. So I want to have a series of conversations with a bunch of subject matter experts from across this district to talk about the real issues. And I do not think there's any more pressing issues than the issue we're talking about today, which is protect our youth. So with that, I want to go ahead and jump into it and get to our panel members. Hey, how y'all doing, everybody?
How you doing?
Hello there.
All right. Hey, everybody. I want to go ahead and introduce you first and foremost to Mayor Jonathan McCollar. He's the mayor of Statesboro, Georgia, which is the home of Georgia Southern University. I've had the pleasure of actually visiting Statesboro a number of times now. As a matter of fact, I had the pleasure of dining with the mayor recently at his Mayoral Ball 2023, which is an amazing event. So welcome, Mayor McCollar.
Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to be here tonight. Just really excited about this great conversation topic that I'm extremely passionate about, and just ready to hear some great ideas from some great folks.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Mayor McCollar. All right. Next, I want to introduce a great friend of mine from Augusta, GA, Miss Lynn Gladney. Welcome, Miss Lynn Gladney is House of District Representative 130 for the House District here in Augusta, Georgia. And so if Miss Lynn Gladney, I'm not going to mess this up because I know you already got it laid out. Where does that area actually consist of, your House District?
So it is East Augusta and South Augusta. So everything that flanks the border of South Carolina, everything that flanks alongside the river. If you're downtown Augusta, right near the boat dock, right there in front of Maryland Fried Chicken, everything going along East Boundary all the way to Burke County border, flanking toward Fort Gordon, all the way to Windsor Spring Road, and everything southward of Deans Bridge Road back to, like I said, Burke County border is within my district.
Okay, good deal. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, ma'am, and we're glad to actually have you as part of the conversation. Now, last but not least, there's Miss Ponsier Daniels. Miss Ponsier is a licensed therapist, but she's also a talk show host, which we're not focusing on the talk show host part of it tonight, but what we want to do is we want to highlight that for you. But she's been doing some amazing work out there as a licensed therapist out in the Warren County area. So we're definitely going to tap into that tonight as well. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to share this platform with the amazing Mayor McCollar, as well as State Representative Miss Gladney. Thank you so much for your service in our area.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's get to what everybody came here to see, the conversation, right? Talking about the issue of protecting our youth. Now, here within Augusta, Georgia, which Miss Lynn Gladney knows very well, we've had a number of issues, but it's really not unique to our area, right? Here within our area, we had recently a spate of deaths amongst the youth that was due to gun violence, right? We had a 13-year-old that we lost, as well as a 15-year-old. And Mayor McCollar, I was down in Statesboro recently. You spoke a lot about some of those issues that were taking place in your area as well. That's very similar to this area. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with you, Mayor McCollar, for the first word. What is the problem?
Well, the biggest problem, excuse me, the biggest problem that we're seeing in rural Georgia is the social infrastructure that we need for the youth in our communities. And what I mean by that is that once our kids get out of school, what are they doing after that? What's happening in the community that's providing those activities, those support services that's really going to allow our kids to have the opportunity to meet their potential. They can operate in safe, structured environments. And so what we've identified down in Statesboro is that we wanted to really target the areas that our kids were living in and wanted to be very specific. So what we did, as soon as I got into office in 2018, we established a youth commission. And several years later, out of that youth commission, we've done several studies. We worked with the community, and we began to identify some things that we could do to help build that social infrastructure. One of the first things that we did is establish a youth work program that happens over the summer that lasts about 5 weeks. The reason why we chose to go that route is because what we find is that our kids typically get in trouble after school and during the summer. And so we was like, well, if we could occupy 5 weeks of their time during the summer by putting them to work so that they can earn some funding, that would allow us a great opportunity to be able to address those kids. And through the process of this research, we also saw that our kids were struggling in school. And if you know the formula, if a kid is struggling in school, then they're more than likely going to be a behavior problem. And so if they're getting sent to the sent to the principal, ultimately that school to prison pipeline is going to develop. And so with more research and a lot of help from professors and individuals associated with the university, local activists, social workers, educators, we came up with this idea called Village Builders. And what Village Builders has done is that we've actually divided our city up into 5 zones that have the highest group of kids that's in at-risk situations. And what we do is that we micro-target those areas by providing support services that address childhood literacy. We look at food scarcity, clothing scarcity, and then we also look at healthy neighborhoods. I think a lot of times we don't talk about the environment that our kids are growing up in. And if our kids are living in homes that we don't want to live in, then guess what? That means that that's a stressful environment that child is living in. And so what we recognize in our area is that the more work that we do on that social infrastructure side, investing more into outside of the school setting, incorporating best practices like early childhood literacy, mentoring, things of that nature, we can definitely see an opportunity where we can step in and provide that support for our kids. And overall, this is something else that we have to understand too, especially when we're dealing with our kids, is that they're dealing with a lot. We're in a post-COVID situation. We're dealing with Gen Z. Gen Z has grown up dealing with, mass shootings. They're dealing with shootings within their community. They're dealing with the toxic politics that our country is involved in. So there's a whole host of things. And so what we have to do as decision makers is understand that there's not a one-trick pony that can solve all of these things. What we have to do is work comprehensively and then allow ourselves the flexibility to do the things that work in our community so that we can save the kids that we see every day.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that insight, Mayor McCollar. And Ms. Lynn Gladney, I'm going to go ahead and toss this to you because holistically, I think Mayor McCollar caught a lot of things that we know to be true here within Augusta as well. But you want to add on to that?
Yes, I would. So can you hear me good? Because I'm having to use my phone. Can y'all hear me fine? Okay. So I agree completely. Due to historical lack of investment in some of our communities, something that we've seen systemically happened exactly what he was saying about, whether or not holistically there has been an investment in education, making sure that we have access to healthy food, making sure that we have access to health care, and making sure that our educational system has, been equally, we have access to all of the things that make sure that our students and the young people in our communities are having the same types of exposures to things that encourage and motivate and inspire them like other children. And some of the things that, I can speak to just from my purview of having served in the legislature, one of the things that one that was profoundly sobering for me was there was no legislation that I saw on the floor for consideration that I saw that qualified as a measure of intervention, which I knew was the thing that would make a profound difference in my community. And so all those measures that the mayor just mentioned were all measures of intervention. And none of those things that I saw, that we saw on the floor, did any of those things. And so I'm going to go a little bit into some of the things that we did see. So just to be fair, so there was just, when I say just a hint, so there was a bill HB 87 that offered some non-traditional. And the name of this bill was Non-Traditional Special School Act, and it gave some secondary educational measures to decrease the dropout rate. And there was also a bill, SB 42, that gave a little bit of put a little bit of funding to notification postings in public facilities about stuff like human trafficking and measures like that. And there was some additional funding down the line for education, but there was no real intentional efforts about interventional measures. But we saw a lot of legislation that was targeting. So for instance, there was a Senate Bill 44 that was an intentional bill that targeted individuals, called the gang bill. It raises mandatory minimum to 20 years for 17-year-olds who are involved in a crime that could be considered anything where it's activity for individuals, from if they were spray painting a building or egging a house, all the way up to, a carjacking or, robbing a bank. So, that whole gray area, in the middle, they could be charged, and the district attorney or the judge has the discretion, and that area was very, very gray, and we knew that was specifically targeting. There was also a measure, HB 35, and it expanded arrest authority, the Port Authority. This was specific for Savannah. Those people in that area asked for that. Asked for that law enforcement authority. Local, enforcement officers were stressed because they don't necessarily have, local enforcement officers there to help with the management of the entire port, plus what's going on in the city there. And so while I saw some, money and effort put toward these measures, I did not see the same type of efforts that were put toward, like I saw interventive measures, like I heard the mayor just talk about. And what I walked away with thinking is that, as leaders, we have to come back to our neighborhoods and our communities and have a voice of advocacy where we put intentional support ourselves into those measures. And so some of those programs and resources and stuff that I see going on in my community, if in fact I can come.
All right, I think we just lost Miss Lynn Gladney. That's a entire different show we're going to talk about when it comes to broadband connectivity out here in our area.
I'm in South Augusta. Just tell her to come down the street.
Right. But look, it's probably time to transition to you anyways, Miss Daniel. So with that point, because Ms. Gladney, she was also highlighting a number of issues, and she got to the legislative side of it. But what I really want to touch upon when it comes to those things she was talking about, to connect that back to our youth within those school systems, where you're seeing. Oh, Ms. Gladney, welcome back. Hey,
welcome back, Ms. Gladney. Now I'm in South Augusta near Gate 5, Fort Gordon. So if you need,
no, I'm deep. I'm deep.
Oh, you're deep off in there. Okay. Well, let's carry on with the conversation. So, Ms. Daniels, once again, you're doing some amazing work that I was able to experience firsthand today when I came out to Warren County. I was able to visit the school and see firsthand exactly how you stood up that health clinic, right? What have you been seeing from within the school system out there, or even through some of your other travels and your works, as to the why, right? Why are we seeing so many issues? And I know they covered the pandemic earlier, and we talked about that earlier, how it kind of exasperated what's going on, but go ahead and weigh in, please.
I'll be honest with you. Mayor McCollar was on point with some of the factors that he identified for some of the reasons why we are seeing I would say an enormous amount of behavioral problems and criminalistic behaviors in our community. I've worked I worked with juvenile justice, the Department of Juvenile Justice, for a little over 8 years. And when I think about the risk factors and some of the things that contributed to juvenile offending behavior, I would definitely say one would be poor parenting skills. Oftentimes we have to look at environmental factors. Also, we have a lot of students and young people who also have incarcerated parents. So therefore you have single parent homes. Oftentimes you have grandparents that are raising their children. My parents actually raised my brother's 7 children. And so those are things that not only did I experience within my own family dynamics, but I also experienced a lot of this working in different systems. Also, with regards to when you start to see a student at an early age starting to have academic problems, sometimes those academic problems or those behaviors in the school could be an indication of an underlying mental health condition or other factors that also need to be identified. Other factors are social media, peer pressure, gang membership. These are a lot of factors that contribute to the problems that we're seeing in our community with our students. Today, I spoke with a primary care physician, also a social worker, and one of her main complaints was that we as the school system could be doing a better job with diagnosing some of our students at an earlier age with problems such as ADHD. Statistically, the most prevalent disorders in ages 3 to 17 years old are ADHD and anxiety. Many of our students are not diagnosed. However, they are labeled as bad and or behavioral, and then they graduate to an incarcerated juvenile detention center setting. That is why I have established a mental health clinic in a rural area. It is Warren County School System. And what we've done is we've come in and we set a mental health clinic inside of the school system. There in Warrenton, Georgia, there are no mental health providers. There are no social workers from what I am understanding. So what we've done is we brought in another licensed professional counselor, and that person is out of North Augusta, South Carolina. So all of us are coming about 50 miles away to service these students in this area that don't have other providers. We've also brought in a psychiatric nurse practitioner who's also able to provide psychiatric evaluations as well as medication management. As you know, in these rural areas, there are barriers to mental health care. There's a shortage of mental health professionals, from your licensed clinical social workers, your licensed marriage and family therapists, your psychologists, psychiatrists, as well as your psychiatric nurse practitioners. Currently, the program that we have is being funded by CARES grant, but every time we initiate mental health initiatives in the school system, it's funded by grants that eventually run out, and you need more funding and resource in order to sustain programs that should be actually a part of a school system's budget because it is a needed resource. Often our students are referred to outside providers. There's no continuity of care. Students are less likely to be seen. They're more likely to be seen when services are easily accessed within their setting where most children need that immediate care. And so there are so many factors. I think Mayor McCollar was spot on with identifying those. There's early academic problems that can be indicator of an underlying mental health issue, your family problems. And I think we have to do better now at looking at our family systems. Some of the parents lately that we are trying to engage in treatment, many of those family members also have their own traumas. And what you is that those students now are literally mimicking learned behavior and or behaviors that they are seeing in their homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and we talked at that, I talked with a number of people out there at the Warren County school system. I can see that all of the professionals out there really are trying to figure out how, as a team, you can come together and bring solutions to bear that can answer that tough issue, because, we know the pandemic just kind of multiplied the problems, right? And it showcased that we didn't actually have certain things in place to ensure that the children who were returning to the school system, who have been at home in different cultures, right? And that's what I'm trying to bring here with this conversation is perspective, right? So to that point, now here's the hard question. Now we went around and we talked about what's wrong, right? Like we can clearly identify what's wrong. I think the hardest conversation we have to have is what Ms. Lynn Gladney kind of stressed, and I think everybody kind of touched upon it, is how do we come together as a community, right? Because that's one part of it, right? We have so many different cultures within these different areas, right? The 12th congressional district, even though it's 24 counties, it's 750,000 people. That's the equivalent of the size of a city like Seattle, right? So taking all that into account, that the kids are raised at home, right? They're cultured at home, and then they come back to a school system. And I don't want, once again, we talked about the teachers, right? The teachers are overworked, right? Underpaid, right? Trying to figure that piece out. Like, how do we come together as a community, but then also combine that with legislation that can effectively work towards a solution? Because I know each one of you have your own independent visions of how to do that, but I just want to go around the room and get some insight. Go ahead, Ms. Lynn Gladney. I'm gonna start with you.
Well, first of all, so let me just explain how the game is stacked. Okay, so in the House there are 180 seats, right? In order to move a piece of legislation, it takes 91 votes. And I just said that I didn't see any real legislation that was intentional in terms of measures that were interventive measures, right? And so in order to have legislation on the floor that even comes out of committee that has that type of bend, I have to have people at the table that are willing to help support that kind of legislation. So I need bodies and seats that have that type of, that's motivated to do that, right? So in order to do so, what I'm saying is that I have to have players in the game that are willing to do that. So you understand where I'm going with this, right?
Exactly.
We hear you loud and clear.
You pick up what I'm putting down. Okay, all right. So I need voters at the polls that they are thinking in terms of making sure that we have those that we have those objectives in mind, that they are intentional about making sure our objectives are making sure that we're making right choices for our children, that we are thinking about making sure that we want to have people in place that are making the decisions that are right for our children, that are thinking in terms of the things that we want for our communities, that understand where things are lining up in our communities. We have to have that at the table. If we don't, And we can have great ideas about legislation. I have colleagues that have great ideas about legislation, but if we can't get them out of committee and we don't have enough votes to move the legislation across, then those great ideas go no place. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me expand on that and then I'm going to hand this over to Mayor McCollar for his insight. But I just want to make sure everybody's hearing you loud and clear. Right now, there's a lot of issues that we're dealing with in the day-to-day life that is clearly attached to politics. I like to tell a lot of people that we like to put people over politics, right? You know, we try not to let politics interfere with life. But the reality is, every day, Ms. Lynn Gladney, she's at, well, not every day, but when she's in session, she's at the Capitol with her colleagues and they're voting upon legislation, right? And if we're not doing our job across the state of Georgia, really across the nation, if we're talking about, the larger scale, to put the right people in those seats so that we can actually have numbers who all agree with the legislation and know the truth of what we need to get to, then we're fighting a endless fight. It's not going to go anywhere, right? So we really need people to step up, use their voice, get out there and vote. Mayor McCollar, I've heard a lot about it out there at Georgia Southern. When I came out, I see that you have a lot of motivated young people on the Georgia Southern University campus. A little bit towards what Ms. Gladney was saying. How does that solution look coming from, Statesboro?
Well, on the municipal side, I'll say that Representative Gladney is spot on. You've got to have people in place that's going to pass the legislation to get the things done to help our children. And I'll say this here, and I'll say this in any space. The state of politics in our country is scary. And what I mean by that is that too many of the politicals are more interested in political victories, and not political victories that win for the people, but win for their party. And ultimately, our children, their safe being, their education, their mental health, that should not be a political football that's kicked around by those that's elected to represent us. And what I can tell you is that on the local level, when I was elected in 2017, one of the first things that I recognized is that I had a council that was not going to push my agenda forward. So that meant that we had to go out, beat the streets, and win 3 additional seats 2 years later. And by winning those seats, we were now able to push the legislation that was going to invest into our young people. And that means that we have to get out here and get our people involved with the process. And one thing that I was listening to with Representative Gladney is that we need legislation at the state level that's going to adequately fund our schools so that we have access to mental health, support services. All of those things are built into the budget of our school system. Then we also have to get our local communities to understand, our municipalities, our county governments, that they can provide resources to provide that support as well. And so what we're doing with Village Builders, we're really focusing outside of the school setting. What's occurring once these kids get home? What are the things that they're facing? And what I can tell you as an individual that used to run an alternative school, these kids are dealing with very, very serious issues. And what I tell folks is this: if you want to know the future issues of your community, don't go to the regular school system, go to your alternative school, because those children are already dealing with the issues that's going to be coming down the pipeline for your community. And what I saw back in 2005, 2006 was our kids was dealing with food scarcity. They was dealing with clothing scarcity. At that time, we had hybrid gangs. Today, those hybrid gangs have now graduated into the gangs of disciples, the Bloods, and so forth. And so what we have to do is recognize those early signs so that we're able to step up and use that as an opportunity to set up the infrastructure that's needed to address our young people. And what we have to do is that we got to engage more people into the political process so that we can get the right people in spaces that's going to do the right thing by our young people and not expedient so that they can get another term. And I think that is essential to what we've got to do to move not just our communities and our state, but our nation together. We got to get beyond the politics and just do what's simply best for the people that we represent.
Oh, appreciate that. And I want to highlight one thing that you just said, Mayor McCollar, because you talked about the infrastructure. And I think that the infrastructure that you're talking about, it goes back to a lot of stuff we've been talking about with Ms. Ponsier Daniels down there in Warren County. Mental health is one strong thing that I do believe that we need to bring more resources in for counselors, mentors. And this is near and dear to my heart for the simple fact that the mentors piece is something that I was lacking as a young child growing up in South Augusta, right, on the South side. So I know for a fact that seeing is believing, right? So I really want to be able to bring resources to these different areas. But Ms. Daniels, I'm going to go ahead and give this one to you. What are some of the other things? Because we talked about this at length today, right, where there has to be a community, right, a community impact where it can't just be Ms. Daniels and one therapist there that's trying to help these kids, right? It has to be a community effect where the superintendent and the Board of Education, they only get so much money to put towards educating kids, right? You don't give them money to handle a lot of those crises, right? You don't give them money to go above and beyond, right? So go ahead and weigh in, Ms. Daniels. What does that infrastructure look like, and what's that magic wand we should be trying to wave to basically notify our legislators of what we're looking for to include within our communities?
I think one thing that we could actually advocate more for across the board is psychoeducation. And I'm going to take a personal approach to this. When I was in high school, it was my first experience seeing my mother have to be hospitalized for a serious mental health condition. Additionally, I grew up seeing my grandmother in and out of psychiatric hospitals due to serious mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and bipolar. At an early age, I saw the behaviors, I saw the symptoms, I saw the talking out of her head, I saw her talking to people and hearing voices that weren't there, but I did not know what the experiences represented. And so oftentimes we have our children in homes where they are experiencing things. Either they're observing it and or they are experiencing it, and they do not understand what they are experiencing. So if you don't understand what is happening, you actually don't understand how to get help or where you should get help from or how to access help. Sometimes, and it's Bible, sometimes we perish because of lack of wisdom and understanding. And I can say that across the board. Oftentimes, the most difficult part of the role that I play is trying to engage parents. Sometimes our parents are very defensive. They don't want their child labeled as crazy. There is still a stigma even about seeking out mental health. So I think oftentimes adults and children are not getting the services at an early that I would say at an early onset, so that we can prevent the serious mental health conditions from even developing. And so I think on a more holistic level, I think there should be more initiatives with just psychoeducation in general, because I can tell you right now with the pandemic, yes, there was an increasing rates of suicide, especially among African-American males. We saw more demands on mental health professionals across the board. Even now, we have a wait list for providers and their clients. Additionally, students that are in rural areas, they have more limited access to treatment because oftentimes those students in those areas have Medicaid, your AmeriGroup, your WellCare, your CareSource. For some of our students that are in need of comprehensive psychological evaluations, they're not getting completed because your providers don't accept Medicaid and or they're unwilling to provide those services because of the low insurance reimbursement rates. So therefore you have more students again that are not receiving services and or receiving services so late that now they require inpatient treatment. So I think if we want to start, we need to start with education and then early intervention.
Okay, great deal. And look, I agree 100% with you. And I think that somebody here, I'm going to read a comment from some of the people who have been posting, and just let everybody know here, you can post comments on Facebook and we'll be able to see it and we'll be able to address the panel with these questions. So I just got a question from someone on Facebook named Twin Jackson. Okay, so actually she's just relaying a question from somebody that texted her, but here's the question. It's basically talking about parent involvement. One of the top issues that was stated was the effects on youth in the parents, or the lack of parent involvement. How do we address this issue? We can put everything in place for our youth, but if it's not enforced at home and in our community, it's not going to change. And I just want to touch on some national stuff really quick. We had a 6-year-old in Virginia that brought a gun to school. We had a lot of different issues, of course, here locally, but then you had a whole slew of shootings across the nation. So talking about parent involvement, Mayor McCollar, once again, I'm gonna kick it to you because I really want to hear what you have to say. You said some profound things when it came to our problem with not actually infringing upon the Second Amendment, but at the same time, we have to do something to control that. Go ahead, Mayor McCollar, and talk towards it.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we have to really address is not. I don't really look at it as parent involvement, but village involvement, right? And what I mean by that is that a lot of our kids that we're seeing in our school systems, they're not raised. A lot of them are not raised by their parents. We're looking at grandparents. We're looking at extended family, and then after a certain point, the family structure disappears, and that peer infrastructure begins to set in, right? And so what we have to do is really get a good understanding of where do we meet our kids at. And this is what we've embraced in our community. What we've recognized is that we have to engage our children well before they get to the school system. And that means one of the first things that we have to do is make sure they have access to adequate health care, make sure that they are being introduced to literacy at a young age, make sure they're not struggling with food scarcity, dealing with clothing scarcity, the physical environment that they're in. They're living in clean, healthy neighborhoods. But the other piece to this is that we're also looking at a space where it's not just this generation of parenting or village or village support. We're looking at generational behaviors that have come into play. And so what the children are seeing are behaviors from parents or caretakers that the caretakers and parents have picked up from folks that were before them. And so what we have to do is begin to engage that in a comprehensive fashion. And so what we promote in Village Builders is that we promote that if the child is a part of the program, then the caretaker or the parents, they have to receive some form of service from us as well. And so whether that's working to provide access for the parents to have access to health care, working with them to help find jobs, working with soft skills so that once they get the job, they can keep the job. It's a whole host of things that we have to address. And this is what my take is. I really think we have to rethink education, social infrastructure, and how we engage our young people in this country. Because what we're seeing is other parts of the world, they are leaving us behind as we look at how we engaging young people and educating them and preparing them for tomorrow's workforce. And if our state, if our nation, if we're going to keep up with this, we have to be prepared to do some things that we have not done in the past. And so the state of Georgia, our nation, we have to be deliberate about providing the support services in and outside of the school setting. We got to provide support services to the parents, caretakers, and the members of the village. And then we also have to really, really think about how do we really address the gang situations that's within our communities. And these are for the kids that's extremely at risk. And what I recognize is that we're not going to be able to save them all, but when they return to our community, what resources are there to help them walk another path? So again, and I can't say this enough, it's a whole host of things that we have to do. But I do believe that we have to be deliberate, we have to be flexible, and we got to put the resources together. We got to have our state representatives, our congressional leaders, those at the local level working collaboratively to build out the infrastructure that's really going to change the course of our community. And I want to say this, and then I'll turn it over. Everything that we're talking about is a twofold issue. It's a public health issue, and it's a public safety issue. And so if we're talking about reducing crime, creating safer communities, then we got to do all of these things, because law enforcement and teachers can only go so far. There's a greater responsibility that we all have. And then on the public health side, we recognize the issues that's associated with ADHD and ADD, but what about those other stressors that's leading to those mass shootings that we're seeing inside of our school systems and inside of our communities? So we really have to be aggressive, deliberate, and making sure that we're doing the things that's right for our young people, not just today, but building the infrastructure for down the line.
Absolutely.
And so, can I chime in also?
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not certain if this directly addresses the question, but I guess she hinted at, what do we do when we can't engage parents? Then we as other community members, we sort of have to be gatekeepers. There are times where we know that the parent is unable or unwilling to provide safeguards. Then we as community members, as mentors, as peers, we sometimes have to be that person that may build that rapport and engage that youth, because I think sometimes we underestimate the power and influence that we have on a child. Though I came from a great home, great parents, I still had someone in the community that I highly respected and I valued, and I listened to them. So sometimes parents are not going to be able to live up to those expectations, but you may be the one that can set that example and provide that role model that that student needs. So there are others that can fill in the gap, so to speak. And as Mayor McCollar said, there are going to be some that we are not going to be able to save.
No, absolutely. And once again, I think that's the thing that everybody's driving towards. And I want to highlight this because I feel this very strongly. K through 12 education should be the focus, right? Early childhood education, engaging kids early and often. Because here's the thing, kids are not going to do anything other than what you raise them to do. It's per culture. It's a proven thing, right? The kids, as they're nurtured, and as a community, it's on us where we see kids who are homeless. We see kids who are struggling. And we talked about this at length as well, Ms. Daniels. You see these kids that are struggling, but we don't really, even though we have those indicators, our hands are tied on a lot of issues on how to help them. So from a legislation standpoint, I know a lot of people are afraid on infringing upon others' rights, right? That's just everybody saying, oh, I want everybody to be free. But then you have to understand that freedom also leads to something, right? And once again, I don't advocate for either or, but it's just the reality of it, right? Like if we're going to have certain freedoms where X parent does not have to abide by community rules, and then they put a child into the system where the child cannot really be corrected with what I see, right? So it's a discipline problem a lot of times. And then sometimes it's mental health problems, and sometimes it's other issues. Like you never know what it is though, right? And so to have those resources in place to identify them is one part of it, but then to be able to address it, right? To be able to follow through and be able to provide that child with holistic support, those wraparound services. I think that's the trick in having that parent involvement. You can't force the parents to do it, but hopefully we can motivate the parents to do it. And like, once again, it's a community effort plus a legislation effort. So with that, what I want to do is I want to go around the room and I want to get some final words from everyone, because this issue, it's huge, right? And I don't think that we're going to solve this overnight, but I think that the conversation here is perfect. Oh, wait, one second. I actually do have another question before I do, because I want to capture Miss Latasha Martin. She asked, do you feel that in some instances students are being overlooked, not properly diagnosed with behavior disorders, or due to their family situations, not to mention the shortages of teachers as well. All right, so I'm gonna let Ms. Daniels weigh on that real quick, and then I'm gonna get a word from Mayor McCollar and Ms. Lynn Gladney before we go to final words.
Can you please repeat that question again?
The question was from Ms. Latasha Martin, and just to, all right, it's on the screen now, or it should be coming up. Do you feel that in some instances students are being overlooked, not properly diagnosed with behavioral disorders, or is that due to family situations, not to mention the shortage of teachers as well?
I do believe that there are a number of students that are underdiagnosed and or not diagnosed. And there are times where you will see behavioral concerns as a result of family situations. Also, there are instances where we have an increasing rate of bullying behaviors that are occurring within the school system. So in some cases, you have students that are acting out in class in order to escape the class or escape the environment. You also have instances where sometimes we do not understand the impact of the tone that is set at home. There are so many students that come to school and they're being fussed at or yelled at right before they are sent to school. And so now what the child is dealing with in the home is now spilling over into the classroom setting. Additionally, there is a shortage of teachers, but I believe that there's a shortage of teachers nationally because teachers also have a burden of dealing with not only the students' behaviors, but the students' emotional issues, as well as budding psychological issues. Also, there are strained school systems. I hear a lot of teachers now complaining about leadership. So I think that you have to be able to address those things. Those things have to be addressed separately, but they still can have an impact on the student, if that makes sense. So a student can be impacted by the school environment and home, or one or the other.
Okay, no, absolutely. And actually, it was two comments that just came in, and like I say, I know I promised to go ahead and move to the final words, but I want to address this, and I'll give this one to you, Mayor McCollar. What is the best advice that you would give to community leaders who desire to be a part of the solution? Where do they start? And an additional comment Ms. Arnie Post stated was, and I'm going to show this on the screen, students are also experiencing trauma within the schools as well. So
I actually noted that, Dr. Poe. Yes, I actually noted that as well. Many of our students are dealing with trauma, and we use the word trauma so loosely now in our culture. Some things are life. Some things are what we would consider negative, adverse events. And then there are significant traumas. And when I think about some of the more pervasive and more deeply impactful traumas, it would be the sexual abuse that is occurring at home. Sometimes our relatives, those things often are not disclosed until the child is out of the home or have been removed from the home. A lot of occurrences of physical abuse as well, oftentimes resulting in defects getting involved. Other traumatic experiences have been COVID. When I started working with the Warren County school system, my first student was due to, he had COVID and it was transmitted to his mother. And as a result, his mother passed away. And so those are some things that our students, we were trying to navigate uncharted territory as adults. So imagine the pressures that our students were under, having COVID and or seeing family members battle COVID and or pass away as a result of COVID. Additionally, being in their home settings, which also led to increased anxiety. We have some students that have still not acclimated back to the school systems. So we have so many traumas that our students are experiencing, some of which we are still not aware of. I was sharing with Mr. Jackson earlier that one of the teachers was able to quickly identify that a student was in need of mental health services because her grades were slipping. She was sleeping in class and she had sadness and had been withdrawn. Well, what was going on at home was that her father was recently sent home on hospice for stage 4 cancer. And she was up in the middle of the night because he was falling out of the bed. And so she was assisting her grandmother with caring for her father. So how do we expect our children to function at school when they're dealing with a traumatic experience. Not only is she having to have sleep problems because of lack of sleep, but she's also witnessing, experiencing her father pass away. So oftentimes we don't know what our children are dealing with unless someone in the community reaches out to a school official to let them know.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Dr. Poe was correct. There's a lot of trauma that our students are experiencing, many of which we don't know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, and no, that's perfect to answer the question with the trauma. And I definitely want to highlight that. Please, Mayor McCollar, in your final words, as well as that first question, which I'm going to put that up on the screen. I know you are a man of many words, and I know you can craft this to make sure everybody fully understands. But the second question, to include the question about trauma within the schools, is what is the best advice that you would give to community leaders who desire to be a part of the solution? Where do they start? So, Mayor McCollar, if you could just weigh in with your final words and just kind of give everybody a little feedback on that.
The first thing I would say is be great where you are, right? And so if your leadership role in the community is being a head of a church, if it's head of being of a mentoring program, wherever you are, be great in that space. The next thing I would say is be a bold advocate. You got to show up to these spaces where decisions are being made. Decisions are being made at your board of education. Decisions are being made at City Hall, your county commission officers, state representatives. You got to make sure that the people that represent you understand what your concerns are within your community. And one of the things that was very interesting to me when I got into this space was that a lot of people expect a lot out of those that represent them on the elected side, but very few of them engage those folks. And what I would tell the people that's looking at this, go to those meetings. If they're having town halls, if they're having a regular council meeting, a regular board meeting, show up to that. And then if you can't make it to that, call them, email them, make sure that your voice is being heard, because at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us to correct and change the things that's within our community. And I want to say this before I close out. We have to create a culture or a societal behavior shift where we all understand that it's our responsibility to do our part to leave this world in a better condition than what we found it. And that means that it doesn't matter what your title is. None of those things matter. Just work to make the world better for where you're at. And then if we're all doing that, then that means that we're working towards creating a place where our children do not have to deal with the ills of our society. And this is one thing that I want to end it with this. There's something fundamentally wrong with a nation when we have so many young people suffering from the stresses of mental illness, living in communities where we have high rates of gun violence, and a nation that has so much. Why are so many of our young people dealing with the ills of poverty? We really have to begin to rethink how we are addressing these things. And we have to say, though we've done this for decades, it's okay for us to change. And this is, and I'm reminded of what State Representative Gladney said when she was looking for the legislation, and the legislation that she was seeing was more on the punitive side. And if we hadn't learned anything in the past 50 years and building the largest prison population in the world and not having a safer community, America is not safer than what it was 50 years ago when we started this prison industrial complex. It is not safer. And if we've been doing that for 50 years and things are not safer, then I think after 50 years, we can say we might need to do something a little bit different. And that little bit different is properly equipping our communities, our schools, our teachers, our social workers with the equipment that they need in order to provide the services to our young people to keep our community safe. After 50 years, we can do better.
Yes, sir. Hey, I'm with you on that, Mayor McCollar, and I'm glad you gave Miss Gladney that alley-oop. Miss Gladney, it's over to you. Hey, closing statements. Mayor McCollar just said a mouthful, but he put you on the spot to go ahead and deliver. What's going on? How you feeling?
You know what? I'm glad you set it up about the correctional institutional issue that we have in this country. So the budget for this state, $0.2 billion was set aside for the board regions, for young people to be able to go to college, 4-year universities. 442 million was set aside for them to go to school and learn technical trades. There was also $100 million set aside in this budget to refurbish and reopen McCray State Prison. Okay, you heard me. So I want you to think about that. Closing thoughts. I just want to affirm what Mr. Daniels and what the mayor has also stated. At the end of the day, each one of us, regardless of title, we are a human being and deserve to live in space, to live healthy, full lives, and to be safe, to be valued, and to be affirmed. And part of that local involvement, vote. So please, sure, wherever you are in that space, if it's your church, if it's whatever civic community organization that you're involved in, please involve, support somebody else, support another child, support an organization. Do what you can to make the space better.
All right, we just lost Miss Lynn Gladney again. Miss Daniels, you want to go ahead and weigh in, final thoughts, and wrap all this up?
I think my final thoughts are a summary of what Mayor McCollar and Ms. Gladney was saying. I think it goes back to identifying your own individual purpose. Each of us has an assignment. And when God gives you an assignment, that's because there is an issue on earth that he would like for you to invest your time in being the solution for. So if each of us would focus on what we are assigned to do in the areas that we are assigned to help, then I think we would see greater impact. And sometimes each of us, we don't know our purpose. So we need to serve where we are at, as Mr. McCollar said, until we really identify the very thing that we're supposed to do. And until that time comes where things are crystal clear, then support those that are supporting initiatives that you believe in.
That's right.
There it is. There it is. And hey, look, that was amazing. This panel, this is the first time, first episode. I want to thank each one of you for giving that feedback. And like I say, my closing thoughts is exactly what everyone's already said. I'm just going to repeat that. We have to look outside of ourselves as a nation. Every person has to look outside of yourselves, and we have to figure that everything is tied to one another, right? So we are truly a community. We're going to come at it from a community perspective, right? We're going to stop asking for huge amounts of money at the very top in those boardrooms when we know for a fact that we're walking right by somebody that's homeless, right? Like there's a certain aspect of civility and morality that comes into it when you start to talk about how we need to take care of one another in these communities. So I'm hoping that we can get to that. I know it's not an overnight thing, but I truly appreciate each one of the panel members that have showed up here. I hope that everybody got to see that Miss Lynn Gladney's phone number at the Atlanta Capitol. So if you can call her up, get her and her counterparts motivated out there at the Capitol, perfect. Mayor Jonathan McCollar out there in Statesboro doing the good work. Hey, everybody, tap in with Mayor Jonathan McCollar. He's got some exciting stuff going on around the city of Statesboro as well as Georgia Southern University. And Ms. Ponce Daniels, I have to give you this highlight, and I'm just going to go ahead and add this to the stream to let everybody know. Ms. Ponce Daniels will be doing a show on June 11th that we highlighted earlier, but there's going to be a special going on her birthday for you to purchase those tickets from April 28th to the 30th. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you all for coming out.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this discussion tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Right. Well, hey, love everybody. Y'all have a great night, and hopefully y'all check in next week for next week's episode. That's going to be on education. We're going to talk with a number of people from the Board of Education to include superintendents and possibly principals. But I'm just going to ask everybody, if you really want to get in touch with me, please tap in there on my website, which is www.danieljacksonforcongress.com. We're trying to move things here within the community. Love everybody, respect everybody. Hope everybody has a good night.
All right. Great night.
Good night.
Good night.